Cafe Anyway. Look at that. Mike Matthews here.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
At Cafe Anyway. Hey!
Mike's Daily Podcast.
It's episode 2396, 2396, and Mike Matthews. And I'm going to fix this used car lot of life. It's interesting when I'm singing to you right now in the night, just before the big time change.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
So possibly by the time you are listening to this, we have switched time to daylight savings time or something like that.
Mike's
And you might be saying,
Daily
Mike, how do I deal?
Podcast.
How do I deal with this at Cafe Anyway?
Yeah.
Somewhere in Podcastro Valley, 10, the last place on earth, with that episode 2396. Well, dealing with the time change, the daylight savings time. Exercise. Believe it or not, exercising earlier in the day can help you maintain energy throughout. And it also promotes healthy sleeping patterns. It's because when you exercise, a chemical called serotonin is released in your brain, and that helps your body adjust to various changes. You don't have to do a heavy workout, just a steady morning walk that gets your heart pumping. You'll want to avoid exercising later in the evening, as energy boosts can interfere with the quality of your sleep. Now, wait a minute. This according to worldtimeserver.com. I don't know. I heard it's good to exercise before you go to bed. That way, you're like burning calories as you sleep. So, well, at any rate, it does say to exercise and to keep your naps short. The proposal sounds crazy. An adult taking a nap, that's crazy. Remember when you were kids and you were forced to take a nap? I never fell asleep. It was like, no, I'm not going to do what you tell me to. I'm not going to sleep on command. What do you...
And here's today's podcast picture.
The podcast picture has a picture, well, it's a podcast picture is what it is. That's the name. But it does have a bit of a clock in it, and since we are talking about time, and time, see what's become of me, and all that, and the Bangles, and Susanna Hoffs of the Bangles, who has collaborated with many different people. That's right, not with the late great Basil the Boxer, though. Although, I have a feeling they would probably get along, but no, she worked with Billie Joe Armstrong on a couple of videos and covers during the pandemic, and before that she worked with Matthew Sweet. That song, hey, got a good thing going, and see you come my way, and I see you, you're back in the arms of a good friend, and I need you back in the arms of your girlfriend. It's called Girlfriend. The two did an album, I think it was pretty good, but most well known for the Bangles. And that song, Time, See What's Become of Me, was called Hazy Shade of Winter. That was actually a Simon and Garfunkel song. So you should listen to one and then the other. They're both vastly different. One is very 60s sounding. The other is very 80s sounding, trying to sound 60s but coming off 80s. And it was from the movie Too Low for Zero. Was that it, or was that the Elton John song? The one with Andrew McCarthy. McCarthy? No, that's the guy who was Spider-Man. Who's the guy am I thinking of? Okay, see? My vast knowledge only goes so far. And then I hit a roadblock. Yeah, Andrew McCarthy. Oh, Andrew Garfield is the latest Andrew that's popular. There you go. You know, you guys back here at Cafe Anyway could shout out at any time and help me out. You know that. I could use a lifeline now and then. Susanna Hoffs. I was speaking to somebody recently, as of today, as a matter of fact. And Andrew McCarthy, by the way, does not age, just so you know. He doesn't have the ability to age. He's probably... he's 60. this year. He's going to be 60, and he looks younger than me. I'm 53. So how is that possible? But we were also discussing, I was speaking to Masa today. I know someone named Masa, and Masa has told me he's going to do a podcast at some point where he's going to talk about all kinds of different sports. Sports, that every sports has a ball of some sort. So the podcast will be called Masa Ball. But he said, no, actually, that's not the name. I take that back. Would have been a terrible name. What am I thinking? Or what was he thinking? At any rate, Cafe Anyway, we were discussing Paul Carrack. And I always go on a tangent about Paul Carrack, and I'm going to keep it to, I've got a timer right here, and start. Here we go. 1 second, 2 seconds. Here we go. I'm going to do a thing about Paul Carrack, and it's going to be no longer than 20 seconds. Paul Carrack was with the band Mike and the Mechanics. Before that, he was with a band called Ace that had the song, How Long Has This Been Going? And also with Squeeze, Tempted by the Fruit of Another. But with Mike and the Mechanics, In the Living. But he had a solo song called Don't Cheer For Me. 21 seconds. My life won't end without you. Long as the night will be, the sun will rise without you. So Masa says to me, and I believe I can quote him on this show, especially because he doesn't listen to it. He said to me, Mike, I think the reason the suicide rate was much lower in the 80s was because the pop music was much more optimistic and passionate, and we got out all that angst, all that anxiety, all the stuff that was messing us up as teenagers. We got it all out in the music. Just all this passion in songs about tears and crying and passion and whoa. And I go, well, so are you talking about the song Don't Shed a Tear for Me by Paul Carrack? Is that what you're... But then Masa and I discussed Filmation. He and I talked about the animation studio called Filmation that, interestingly enough, also did a lot of live action, and they did a show called Ghostbusters. This is years before of course, the big movie Ghostbusters with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and everybody, Rick Moranis, and everybody. It's now I can't think of anybody else in the movie. Dang it! But everybody was in it. So Sigourney Weaver and others, and as we go outside of Cafe Anyway, we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. Filmation, when they saw how well the movie Ghostbusters did, and they go, hey, remember we actually have the rights to Ghostbusters. Let's make an animated cartoon for it because we got a budget for that. Let's do it. So they came out with the cartoon just before the real Ghostbusters came out, which had characters from the movie Ghostbusters, whereas the animated series Filmation featured animated versions of the characters from their 70s show that they had called Ghostbusters, which was for kids. But the Filmation version, and you can look this up on YouTube, is very bizarre, very out there, very psychedelic, very off, very 80s psychedelic, because it came out in the 80s, mid to late 80s, and just out there. And then we were talking about the late 80s cartoons, and Masa brought up a cartoon that I had never watched called Galaxy High, so I'll have to check out what that is. But we also discussed Robotech, and I was remembering a show called Battle of the Planets, which came out in the late 70s after Star Wars, and was an anime show that had been popular. But when it came to America, they totally chopped out a bunch of stuff. Like anything that was controversial, they cut out of the cartoon. So it ended up being much shorter, and I'd love to see the original version before it got chopped up. Oh, and because they didn't want to have any subtitles, they didn't want to put English subtitles in there. They had it voiced over again by people like Casey Kasem, And Casey at the time was a big voiceover actor in cartoons, of course, also on the radio. He had his American Countdown, Top 40 Countdown show that began in the early 70s. And in his early days, before he became hello again, this is Casey Case, I'm all bright and happy. In the early part of the Countdown show, and you can hear this somewhere. I know some radio stations probably carrying it somewhere. In the early 70s, he was much more soft. And coming in at number 5 is Gordon Lightfoot with If I Had Time in a Bottle. Because he was talking soft, and the music was very soft by then. At that time, you had the mellow songs by Neil Diamond, I Am, I Said. Joni Mitchell had some mellow stuff. It was just very mellow era in the top 40 world. But then you'd have something like really cool and dancey. And then as more and more dancey disco stuff happened in the 70s, Casey's excitement got a little bigger, a little more excited, and became the Casey Kasem that we knew in the late 70s and early 80s, until he eventually gave up. Counting down around 1988, I think, was his last of American Top 40, and then he started his own thing called Casey's Countdown, which he did, I believe, up until just before he passed. And I had one time, I actually met and trained his son, Mike Kasem, or Michael Kasem. He was wanting to get into radio, and I guess we were in Thousand Oaks, we were closest to his home, so he wanted to learn radio from us, but then he saw that our rinky-dink, oh my gosh, this is a shout out to all you people that remember KNJO 92.7. Oh, our studios were awful. Just the most disgusting, dusty, horrible little falling apart. And we used automation. And this is in the early 90s. We were using automation with reel-to-reels. If you've seen that, if you watch anything old having to do with radio, you see reel-to-reels. And oh my gosh, these things fell apart and fell off the wheel. The tape came out, flew everywhere. It was a nightmare. So I trained him for one night, and then he was gone. He got the heck out of there. I don't know if he's still in radio. So back to getting used to the time change. All these stories. Oh, Filmation, by the way. I lived in the San Fernando Valley when I was a kid, and my mom, my great mom, who passed away recently, she was amazing because she gave me so much freedom. And she'd say, like, oh, you can bicycle wherever you want. If you can make it there, then, I trust you. She trusted me. So I would ride my bike. We had a friend named George who was Norwegian. And I said, I'm going to ride my bike to George's. He lived over by the Van Nuys Airport. And I get over there, and he wasn't home. So I knew he'd be home at some point, and we didn't have cell phones. I thought I'd wait him out. I may have had some coins in my pocket to call on a payphone, call my mom if I needed a ride. But I was riding my bike around that area, and there was Filmation. The people that came up with the Ghostbusters. And I think they also did Fat Albert. They did a bunch of Saturday morning cartoons. They did some live action stuff too. I think they did the Shazam show. But yeah, there were the studios. They were closed. I couldn't get in. And I've never been the type to just walk into something and, hey, I'm Mike, hire me. I would have loved to have worked there, but I saw where Filmation was. I don't know how long it stayed there, but at any rate, Cafe Any Rate. A shout out to George if he's still with us. But yes, Mom was a very trusting parent and said, you do what you want to do. Just don't get into drugs and don't get into anything nefarious. But other than that, she trusted me. Riding a bike down Van Nuys Boulevard, she could... You know what? Wait a minute. It wasn't Van Nuys Boulevard. It was the other, what's that street? Because Van Nuys goes north-south, I think. It was a street, whatever the street is that goes under the Van Nuys airport runway. Whatever that one is. Now I can't think of it. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been down there. Is that Ventura Boulevard? Well, whatever. Cafe whatever. There you go. Okay, so keep your nap short is the whole point of all of that. If you get tired and feel that you absolutely must nap, stick with short ones, no longer than 20 minutes. Ensure that you take your nap earlier in the day. The closer you nap to bedtime, well, you probably won't get as much quality sleep. A better suggestion would be to exercise by going for a short walk. But again, if you absolutely must nap, keep it short. Don't eat late. You've heard about that before. Food in your stomach and the digestion process can actually affect the quality of sleep you receive. This is interesting especially since the opposite is true as well. Poor sleep can affect your digestion all the same. You always want to afford your body ample time to digest your latest meal. Set your clock early. The daylight savings time change generally takes effect early Sunday morning, around 2 o'clock. This can affect you negatively because you lose that hour of sleep or gain it right before a busy work week. If you can, set your clock appropriately earlier in the weekend. So, well, at this point, it's almost 7 o'clock on a Saturday, regular crowd shuffles in, then it's too late now. But yeah, that's something to think of for when the fall comes around. By resetting your clock on a Friday evening or Saturday, you're allowing yourself more time to adjust, provided you have the weekends off. If you don't have weekends off, then try to schedule the time change on a day when you have off. The downside to doing that is that it can confuse your schedule if you have events or activities planned for a certain time. Just remember that you changed the clocks early and you should just be fine then, if you remember that. Don't stay up later when you lose an hour for those days you're thinking of taking extra times. Also, avoid alcohol and coffee. Caffeinated beverages and alcohol are included on that list. To try and get a good night's sleep, avoid that. Avoid drinking that. Alcohol can actually cause bad nightmares and severe breathing or respiratory issues, affecting the amount of quality sleep you get. Interesting. That's all from worldtimeserver.com. Okay, outside a cafe anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. Gas prices going up. How is that possible if the U.S. doesn't get much oil from Russia? Well, apparently the United States is the world's largest oil producer, ahead of Saudi Arabia and Russia, believe it or not. But it's also the biggest oil consumer. A ban on Russia oil led U.S. officials to consider other sources that are currently limited. In what was supposed to be a secret trip, senior U.S. officials traveled to Venezuela over the weekend to discuss the chance of easing oil sanctions on the major crude exporting country. Biden said it was understandable prices were rising, but cautioned the U.S. energy industry against excessive price increasing. You heard about that. What's being done to help with the price? Proposals for a gas tax holiday. You know, we should just eliminate the tax here in California. That's easy to do, right? Just snap your fingers. Do it, Newsom. And so proposals for a gas tax holiday to counter inflation has been moving slowly in Congress and state capitals before Russia invaded Ukraine, but they have gained momentum this week amid surging prices. Republican legislative leaders in Michigan and Pennsylvania announced proposals to suspend or reduce state gas taxes. That after Newsom called for relief from state gas taxes as well on Tuesday. So did the governor of Georgia. Meanwhile, the Democratic governors of Colorado, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin sent a joint letter to congressional leaders urging them to support legislation suspending the federal government's 18-cent gas tax. That's on 18 cents a gallon through 22. Critics of the proposal say there is no guarantee, however, that the savings would get passed on to consumers. I hate that. Whoever doesn't let that get to the consumers, whatever oil company doesn't allow that, we should all just stop. Just leave. Don't go to their gas stations. Find out who it is and just stop. That's what we got to do. All right. Well, I still don't understand exactly from this article from MSN.com and NBC Chicago why our gas prices are going up despite the fact that we're not using as much Russian oil. 8% of U.S. oil imports are from Russia. That's less the U.S. gets from Canada or Mexico, but more than it imported last year from Saudi Arabia. Really? Huh. Okay. Europe is heavily dependent on Russian gas, too. Well, I guess I don't know, and we'll never know, and no one knows the answer. So there we go. It just needs to stop. Also, I also had this interesting article saying that the post-pandemic demand for gas, when the pandemic first hit in the U.S. in March of 2020, demand for gasoline plummeted. Remember those wonderful days? But as the economy recovered, as vaccines rolled out, Americans feel safer about traveling and shopping. So that's brought up gas prices. When demand for gas and oil plunged during the pandemic, OPEC and oil-producing nations such as Russia actually cut production, slashing it by an unprecedented 10 million barrels. That's 10% of the global supply. But as the global economy recovered from the pandemic, OPEC was slow to ramp up production. And then the U.S. sanctions on Russia impacts a global market. The U.S. imports less than 10% of its oil and gas from Russia. The surge in gas prices is due to the larger global oil market. When the U.S. issues sanctions, that has wide ramifications on the ability of Russia to export oil. We don't import a lot, but somebody else does. And we are making it difficult for Russian oil to flow to the global market, and prices are reacting to that. Okay, does that make any sense? That from CBSNews.com. Okay, I think we covered a lot, and now we're going to stop. No, wait, first we're going to say hi to someone.
Hello, Mike Matthews. It's Chely Shoehart, Gift Job Supervisor. That was really helpful and interesting, Mike Matthews.
Thank you. Are you going to go to bed early so you get enough sleep because you're getting an hour taken away from your sleep tonight?
Yes, Mike Matthews, I'm going to sleep right now.
Wow. Chely sure snores loud.
No, I don't, Mike Matthews.
Wait, you're talking to me in your sleep. You're sleep talking.
Yes, Mike Matthews, I'm sleep talking.
That's bizarre. You should probably, not talk too much and tell us what's in your sleep, because then we'll find out everything that's in your subconscious.
Yeah, okay. I'll shut up now, Mike Matthews.
Are you dreaming of a very large milkshake?
No, Mike Matthews.
Okay. What are you dreaming about now?
Dreaming that you shut up.
Okay. She's dreaming about me. That's weird. Look who else is here. Oh, Mike, this is Floyd the Floorman! And this is John Deere, the engineer, Mike. Yes, daylight savings time is really a thing that puts a crimp in my style. I wish I was in Arizona. Yeah! Let's all move to Arizona. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to our program today. The program called Mike's Daily Podcast, or MDP for short. If you would like to perhaps call and comment about something with your call voice, with your mouth hole with your voice larynx box thing, chords, please do. Call 336-MM Daily. That's 3 plus 3 equals what? 6. MM as in Mike Matthews, that's me. And Daily as in what this podcast has been for the past few days. That's excellent. And go to the website, mikesdailypodcast.com, and see the podcast picture today of that wonderful place that I had the best. I had such a good, it was okay. I had a cinnamon roll that was pretty good. And what, some sandwich. I completely forget what it was, but that was during my really horrible, brutal Florida. Was that on a Friday? No, it was the trip to Florida. I was there on a Friday in Florida, but we weren't there that day. We went to New Smyrna on Friday, but Florida, taking care of, setting straight all of my mom's affairs, taking care of them all, getting it all done. So much more still to do, so I'll wrap up the show. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Benita, the Disgruntled Fiddle Player, and the Brewmaster with more ways to contact me. Here's A. Frank.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!